In 2004, you move on to Northern Arizona. You serve as the offensive line coach and recruiting coordinator. You go to Flagstaff, Arizona, which is 2 hours north of Phoenix. Talk more about the transition going from UCLA and then going to Northern Arizona University. It's also your lone season in the FCS ranks, and talk about the differences between the FBS and the FCS.
Like I said before, everywhere I've been, I really have enjoyed it. And my family, we moved from Santa Clarita and packed up and bought a house in Flagstaff, and it was a really good experience for my family because we didn't really know a lot of people in the Flagstaff, and so we had really good family time. And my son played at Flagstaff High, ended up having a great experience as he did it in Southern California. And one of my daughters played softball there at Flagstaff High, and she had a really good time. So it was good for my family. My wife's a nurse, and she got a nice job at Flagstaff Medical Center. It's a big difference. It's a big difference on payday, and it's a big difference, facility wise. But at the end of the day, it's still 11 on 11, and you got to compete. And I had Jerome Sowers was great, and the staff. I had a real good time. I enjoyed it, and it just happened that about 9 months after I was there, Mike Sanford got the job at UNLV and asked me to come with them and coach the offensive line. And so that's, where it went from there. But we actually kept our house in Flagstaff for 10 years and spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, when indoor track and field first started in the West Coast, there was only a few schools that had it. Flagstaff was the main one. You had like Reno. Yeah. And now you have a lot of them, Washington and Washington State, all that. You got better facilities, but we would just take a bus from Northridge to Flagstaff. And I remember going, what was it called, Coach? The Walk-Up Sky Dome? Was that what it's called?
Walk-Up Sky Dome.
Yeah, and they had a sign that said, welcome to altitude or something, like welcome to this many feet.
7,100 feet or something. But actually, they redid the Sky Dome a little bit. It's basically the same. But I think they still are very, very competitive on a national basis in cross country.
Oh yeah, they've won a team title. I say right now, maybe I don't remember the last couple of years. COVID hit it, but for 2 or 3 years they won the national title, and they were just number one. Like they knew their lane. They were like, and they
had a real good facility to train, and then obviously the altitude, and they are well coached, and they're still having success.
Yep.
So you spend only one season at Northern Arizona University. Then you spend the next 5 years at UNLV doing similar roles, offensive line, tight ends coach, recruiting coordinator. Talk more about your chapter coaching UNLV football.
Well, at that time when we got there, Mike came from Utah, and he was with Urban Meyer there, and they had a lot of success there. And in that juncture, Urban left to go to Florida, and Mike got the job at UNLV. And I think they were 2-9 the 2 previous years we were there, and Coach Robinson was the coach there.
Yeah.
And they had approached it a little bit differently and recruited heavily in the JC area. And so when we actually took over there's a little bit of discrepancy between the numbers of players, which you would want to have for your team to win, and what was left there, and kids leaving. And, some kids didn't make it academically. So it was a strain for 2 years. But, and actually, it's interesting. You say, well, gosh, you go 2-10. How could you be getting better? But the program was getting better. Our system was getting better. We were getting good kids into the program, And then from there we went 5-6 and 5-6, and we made really good strides, and we had good kids. And on the last year of the team we had, Ryan Wolf from Hart High School was drafted in the NFL, and Joe Holly, an offensive lineman from Esperanza, he went as I think it was a 3rd or 4th round pick to the Atlanta Falcons and played for 10 years. And Johan Asiata was Joe was the center, and Johan was the guard, and Johan was drafted by the Bears and played with the Bears. So we had some guys, and we had gotten better.
Yeah,
and
talk about
probably the highlights in the big picture. The highlights were, I think year 4 we went to Arizona State and beat Arizona State at Arizona State, and probably the game that was most memorable, I believe it was year 4. Utah came to UNLV and we beat them at home 27-0. And so that just goes to show you the improvement. We beat Iowa State year 5 at home. So we were getting better. And were we over the top, or were we at the point we wanted to be? No, but when you see the office procedure, the recruiting procedure, the kids that we were bringing in, we were doing a lot of good things. And, you know, sometimes admissions and administrators and higher ups think that improvement is only in terms of wins and losses. And that's what we're all trying to attain. And that's what you're ultimately judged by. But there was improvement. And, you know, so they made a change, but that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy my experience. My daughter was playing softball there at the same time. And my wife and I were, you know, she was commuting from Flagstaff, but we were having a good time in both places. And I really liked it, like everywhere I've been.
Talk to me about that a little bit. J-Rob went from USC to UNLV as a football coach, and then he became the athletic director. I remember there was a very special quarterback from Compton, Jason Thomas. He was a quarterback, but UNLV, I was a big fan of Jerry Tarkanian as a kid.
Well, he had tremendous amount
basketball.
of success.
But I remember when they went to football, it was kind of like, oh, whatever. But I do remember always being like, oh, was UNLV going to be good? So were you there during the John Robinson time or at all?
No, I was on the staff that replaced him and his staff.
Okay.
You know, it was kind of unfortunate, and he was probably one of the last guys to do it. He was the last 2 years.
Director.
He was athletic director and head football coach.
Yeah.
I think in today's world, that's a little bit more difficult to do. And his wife Linda got sick, and she was sick, and so that was unfortunate for him. And I think she ended up doing all right, but it was just a hard time for him, and you know, it was hard for him to focus.
2010, you move on to San Jose State. You coached there for a couple of years, and Chris Asher ended up coaching at San Jose State several years after you left. So I'm actually going to ask both of you, like Coach Bernardi first, and Chris, you could chime in as well. Talk more about the experience coaching at San Jose State and what it's like being part of that university.
Well, San Jose was very similar in the position that we were in. Dick Tomey had done a good job, and he had brought the program up, and they were competitive and doing well, and they had a little bit of a slump. And so it was a similar situation when I went to UNLV that we had at San Jose State. And, you know, it was kind of fun in the sense that it was fun because we went from, I believe it was 2-10.
Yeah, you guys won a lot with Coach Tomey there. You did. You won a lot.
Right. We went from 2-10 to 11-3 and won a bowl game, and then ultimately went to Colorado. So, you know, we really, the program improved. It was just kind of the start of when you could do the traveling camps in the summer.
Satellite camps is what they were called. Satellite camps.
Satellite camps, exactly. And we did camps all the way from Sacramento to San Diego, through LA. One day we did a camp in the morning at St. John Bosco, and then we did a second one at night in Inland Empire. We did them at Hart High School. We did them in Bakersfield, and then 2 of them in San Diego. And we for a straight week, we really busted our butt and got to see a lot of kids. A lot of kids got to see us. And then we had a contact camp on campus, which we got to see a lot of kids. So we worked really hard in the camp era, in that avenue or arena, I should say. And we got a couple JC kids, a JC quarterback the last year, and JC running back from Minnesota, who was a San Jose kid. And we did really well and played well. And as I said, went to a bowl. I think we were 11-3. Whatever it was the best season San Jose State had ever had as a record.
Yeah, I remember that. You guys had that quarterback that went to Fales, right?
David Fales was
phenomenal.
I think Monterey Peninsula Junior College.
Yeah. So for Alexander, for you saying it to me and Coach Bernardi talking, so Coach, just so you know, I wasn't in football, I was always track or performance. For me, I got to San Jose State. The head coach was my former assistant. She hired me like on the spot. And really what happened for me was we were so just terrible. Almost like Deion said, we were terrible. I didn't have anybody. So literally she would just tell me, go recruit. I work at San Jose State. I want people to tell. People always go, why did you leave? I go, I lived in LA. Me and my wife had just got married. I lived in LA. The San Jose State coach hired me. I literally lived in San Jose State with her and her husband in her house, and I paid them rent. And I would fly home every single weekend. And I'd fly from Burbank to San Jose.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have practice, I'd leave on a Friday. If I had practice, I'd leave on a Saturday. It was hard. But what I did do there, what I liked about San Jose State was it was a very good institution. It was in Silicon Valley. I would use just a city and a school. Like, man, you guys could get, if you graduate from here, you're going to get a high paying job. If you're in that field, if
you're in the tech world,
you're in the tech world, and a lot of people, and I just said, hey,
good.
You can get wealthier here than I could ever do coaching. Coach, what are you talking about? You're a good guy. No, you were in Silicon Valley. And I liked San Jose State. I've coached at UCLA, I've coached at USC, I've coached at a bunch of other schools. I thought San Jose State was by far one of the most attractive campuses. Their head coach, Charles Ryan, he's a good guy.
It was nice.
It was nice. Coach, I would. This is what I would do on recruit visits. It was funny because the AD didn't even know. There was like a Fleming's or a Morton Steakhouse. There was a Morton Steakhouse in downtown San Jose. I would take them on a happy hour menu because we couldn't afford the regular. But I would take them to Morton's, and people would be like, "Oh my God, it's the best recruit visit I ever had," and they didn't know. I was like, "Don't order off that dinner menu."
Yeah, right. He is selective ordering.
Yeah,
we had a small apartment in Los Gatos, and we had a great time. My wife worked at Stanford. She's a nurse, and it was a good experience. And we did in football. The facilities were limited.
Yeah,
but in football it was difficult at the time to really stimulate energy because Stanford was good in football, real good. The Giants were deep in the playoffs or World Series every year. The 49ers were good. And so there was a lot of other entertainment areas. And that made that part difficult. But in terms of just living and enjoying it, and it was easy to go recruiting, and you could get kids. I had a good experience, and we got better. That's the bottom line. David Quisenberry was probably one of the key ingredients too. He was a walk-on tight end from San Diego, and I asked Coach Mack. He was 6'6", and I asked Coach Mack if we could move him to left tackle. And Coach McIntyre, he agreed with it. And David went on to, he went on to, he's still in the NFL. He's at Buffalo now, but he was such a great leader. And between him and David Fales, they took that team on their backs and carried them in terms of having leadership and developing chemistry. And you cannot be successful if you do not have good leaders in your senior class and chemistry within your team. And Mac did a really good job of building the chemistry of the team. And Quisenberry and Fales, as others, did a really good job of leading them on the field and wouldn't let them lay down. And you could tell. I mean, you could tell in the way we played. We were competitive, and we played good, and we were tough, real tough. One of the great things about coaching, obviously, but I mentioned this previously, and I'll mention this again, is the fact that a young man, if he has a chance to play college football and get a degree, he's making himself marketable in life and in the future. And all those kids on that trip got to go to Washington, D.C. and tour the city, the Capitol, the White House. Now that doesn't happen to a lot of kids that are at San Jose State. Nope. And our team, because we performed and we had that opportunity, it was a learning experience that a lot of kids don't get, but because you played and you were part of the team, that was a great learning experience for our team, is to go to Washington, D.C. for 5 days.
Yeah, you win the 2012 Military Bowl, get a 29-20 win over Bowling Green at RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C.
I remember you were talking about Northridge last week, and I remember, was Dave Baldwin before we got there? Was he? Dave Baldwin, Jim Fenwick. I remember being in Northridge. Didn't Baldwin go to San Jose State? But those are all your guys, huh?
Those guys I played against, but Dave, I used to play against him in coaching. He was at Stanford when I was at SC, and he went to San Jose State before I was there.
Yeah.
And then he was at Colorado State when I was at UNLV and San Jose. So we went against each other a bunch of times, but his wife went to Monroe with me.
Yeah, no, I just remember my last year at college, we had a guy named Bob Burt. He was a head coach. They almost dropped football, but Baldwin took over. Northridge took over overnight, and then he was at San Jose State. And Alexander might have something to say about that. I don't know. I remember that. I remember we got pretty good overnight, and then he went to San Jose State and maybe Michigan State.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was at Michigan State for a while after that. Yeah, correct.
2013, you move on to Colorado. Talk more about the transition going to Colorado. They had recently moved up to the Pac-12. So I assume you're very familiar with just the leagues and the level of competition because you've coached now for quite some time.
Well, it was similar in the fact that when I went to Arizona in 80, they had joined the Pac-10 in 78, only 2 years. Well, this was similar when I went in 13 to Colorado. It was only their second year in the conference. Mm-hmm. So immediately, the thing that I realized when I went out recruiting, or our staff went out recruiting, a lot of kids really didn't know if they weren't sure if we were in the Big 12 still, the Big 8, or the Pac-10 or Pac-12. And trying to change that dynamic was difficult. And they, were in a situation where they had, a lot of success with Bill McCartney and Gary Barnett. And, they hit some tough times, and they were, I think, 2-20 the 2 previous years we were there. So again, we worked really hard with the traveling camps, getting kids to come to our camps there. And, it paid off because the third year we won the Pac-12 South and had a chance to play in the championship bowl and go to a major bowl. But very similar, those last 3 places, UNLV, San Jose, and Colorado, where before we had gotten there, there were not very many wins in the W category, and so that came down to developing leadership, developing your players, recruiting hard, and sticking with your system and getting better. And we were able to do that.
Let me jump in. The late 80s and early 90s, Colorado was a juggernaut. Darian Hagan, Eric Bieniemy, Coach Mack, like you said.
Yeah.
When I was coming up in high school, I graduated in 92. Everybody wanted to go to Colorado. It was one time, they had a 3 or 4 year period. They beat Nebraska. So Colorado's fallen on some hard times. So it's different than when you say that. But like, people don't realize Colorado is an attractive place. Denver's there.
Beautiful
campus. I've been there several times. Beautiful campus.
Yeah. Plus, after year 4, Rick George completed the Champion Center, which was a phenomenal building for athletics and football. 5 stories overlooking the mountains, overlooking the stadium. It was actually built into the stadium. And unfortunately, we didn't have more time to recruit to that building, but it's a real plus, and it's really nice, Now, the high school football, because of a population base, is more difficult. You're forced to go to other areas to recruit, and there's not a lot of bodies, athletes within a geographic distance. With you got to travel pretty much 2.5 hours everywhere to go to get so there's some obstacles in recruiting, but again, my wife and I had a wonderful time in Colorado, liked living there. It's beautiful. And when they make a coaching change, you can always rationalize both sides of the stick, whether it was acceptable or whether it could have been not, handled in a different way. But it's always like that, and that's the way it goes. But in terms of going there, building, getting to the championship game, that was really good.
2019, you ended up winding down your coaching career at San Diego State as an offensive analyst. Talk more about what it was like coaching at San Diego State in the final years of your coaching career and working under Brady Hoke.
Well, it started with Rocky Long, and we retreated back to our home here in Las Vegas, and I really didn't have. I just didn't personally. I didn't have the mindset to be calling and looking for a job and everything, and I just was doing a lot of soul searching what I wanted to do. And Coach Long called me, and I had worked with Coach Long for 2 years at UCLA in the 90s. And he had this position, and so it turned out it was the right position that, I was kind of looking for. But and so I took the position at San Diego State as offensive analyst, and being with the offensive line, and it worked out great. And then when Coach Long took a short retirement and left, I stayed with Coach Hoke. He was wonderful. And I think the thing that I really enjoyed is I knew, because of Coach Hoke and Coach Long, what the culture of the team would be. And it was a similar culture to the way I grew up in coaching. Brady Hoke came from a Michigan background, which has a lot of Ohio State influence. And when I worked for Larry Smith, I was growing up in coaching, it was the same mentality and the same background. And so there was a lot of similarities in the way we grew up as young coaches and moved up. And the next thing was that when I got there, Bob Toledo had previously been the offensive coordinator. So Jeff Horton was now the offensive coordinator, and he carried all the same terminology that Bob Toledo had. So it was kind of coincidental that it was easy to get into the offense and know the offense because it was really the same offense we were using at UCLA.
Mhm.
And that made it nice. And, you know, I really bought in, and I really was excited about joining that culture of the way things are done and the type of players Coach Long and Coach Hoke and our staff were looking for. And it was great. And after last year, we were 7-5, but in 5 of the last 7 years, they've won 10 games there, and we'll probably bounce back and be in that area again this year. But
you said it. We talk earlier about developing players. I always tell people San Diego State's the best school ever. And they go, "What are you talking about?" I go, "It's the best." They go, "What do you mean?" I go, "It's the most popular school in California."
yeah,
I said, if you're a regular student, I remember going to high school. Everybody in my high school who didn't want to go to USC or UCLA wanted to go to San Diego State. It was just,
it was great. You know,
you had Marshall Falk in
expensive.
the 90s. You had McGuire. But what San Diego State's done, they've really attached. They don't have any more pro teams except for the Padres. So San Diego State football is the best team. Their basketball team was to the Final Four. They got an arena. San Diego State is just a juggernaut, if you ask me, a potential juggernaut.
In 1982 or 3, when I was at SC, we opened at San Diego State, and they had Marshall Falk.
Yeah, that's the ESPN video I have. Willie McGinnis on you. It was a tie. It was like 90 degrees.
A knockdown drag out. And it was an exciting game, and I think it was then 42-42 tie.
Yeah, it was a tie. I watched it all the time. And Marshall Falk had amazing plays, and Willie McGinnis and Baselli at the. But San Diego State, I've always said, is just a juggernaut, and with realignment, they're going to end up somewhere big.
It's going to be interesting what happens.
2023, just not too long ago, you decided to retire. Finally pulled the plug on coaching after coaching for 47 years. 42 in college, coached over 500 football games total. Did this time feel right to pull the plug? You started out on your 19th birthday. Now you're 68 years old. Did it feel like it was the right time to finish up your coaching career?
You know, it was a real hard decision. It was very difficult, but you know, I was very torn. But at the end of the day, I felt like I made the right decision, and there were more pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
And you know, the biggest thing is that we have 3 children in Texas, in Alabama, and in Kentucky. And like I said before, my son-in-law coaches at Western Kentucky. My son's offensive line coach at Troy. My other daughter lives in Texas. And I didn't sleep in my own house here in Las Vegas. I didn't sleep when I left in July after vacations. I didn't sleep in my own house till after I retired March 2nd.
Wow.
And so, I'm not complaining, because we always went, we went to a bowl and this and that. And then as soon as we have free time, we made a tour of all the places to go, in Texas to see my daughter, in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and Alabama to go see my son. And I just never really had a chance to see them coach, my son-in-law or my son, very often. And I just felt that was more meaningful at this time of my life. And man, it was hard. I mean, it bothers me. I love coaching. I never did anything else. But you just have to make. Sometimes I just say I just felt like I made the right decision in what was important.
Coach, I asked Alexander this. I'm an avid reader. I go to the gym when I'm working out. I read books or YouTube. Let's talk about your coaching rivalries. You're a big time Southern California offensive line coach, known throughout the things. Talk about some of your competition. I would say, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just throwing out names, but I would imagine Pat Hill from Fresno State had to be a guy you dealt with or saw a lot.
Well, my son played for him, and my son was there for 6 years. So, I had a lot of respect for what Coach Hill did, because my son was
Yeah,
there,
Logan
but
Mankins. He had.
I'm not too proud of this, but this is the truth. This is actually what happened. Is we lose to SC. Excuse me. Where was I? I was in 92 or 3. I guess it was 92. We are ahead of UCLA in the fourth quarter, and we make a 3rd down and 4 with about 8 or 10 minutes to go in the game, which if we went and scored, we would have gone up by 17 or 21.
Yeah.
Estes Creighton fumbled the ball. We recovered, but the ball bounced back 6 yards. So we were forced now, it was 4th and 8. We had to punt. And so we punted to UCLA with 8 or 9 minutes to go. And bang, bang, they hit us on a 90-yarder touchdown. And then from that time on, everything unraveled. And we got beat in the last 8 minutes. So instead of being 8-3, we're 7-4. And then we got caught. We had to play Fresno State in the bowl that was in Anaheim.
The Freedom Bowl. Let me talk about that before you go there. My parents moved to Fresno. This was crazy. My parents moved to Fresno. I'm in Northridge as a freshman. I drive home for Christmas break. As I'm leaving Fresno, every bus from the Central Valley was going to Anaheim. Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring. There. And and you could see Fresno was just like, we're going to beat SC. It was like the greatest thing. And I think SC was more of a letdown. Like Larry Smith had just, I remember guys reading about Curtis Conway and them, like, we don't want to play this game. But for Fresno State, it was like, man,
they did a great job. They had a good team, too. So 2 years later.
Sweeney was there, right? Coach Sweeney.
Coach Sweeney was there.
Yep.
Coach Hill was on the staff.
Yeah.
So then 2002, I'm at UCLA, and I was with Coach Donahue. I was with Coach Hill. Coach Toledo, Coach Durrell, and we have to play in the Silicon Valley Bowl against Fresno State. We get beat. Come back home, lose my job. Twice I've lost my job after playing Fresno State the night before.
Well, the one thing I was gonna say, Coach, now I wasn't doing it but I always wanted, people tell me, Coach Asher, who's your best coaches that you went against? I will tell you right up, there's some guys that are better than me. I think I'm always pretty good, but I always say, man, there's some guys better than me, and I'll tell you immediately, and there's some guys who I battled. One of your other battles, I told Alexander, because I read the book, Ed Orgeron, Meat Market. I want Bernardi. I remember that book. I just read that chart. So talking about that, I remember him reading it, and it was like, what are you doing? But it seemed like you and Orgeron is like this mythic creature in college sports, the Creole guy, get on the Trojan horse, whatever, but talk to me about you and your battles against Orgeron, because everyone talked to that. I saw the book and I read the book.
Well, the rivalry goes pretty intense now, and it's tough. It's it's on the field on Saturdays, and it carries over in recruiting. And sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
You lose some.
Yeah, and so. We'd go to schools, and I wouldn't talk much to him, and he wouldn't talk much to me. And we'd take care of our business and go about our, if we were at a high school game, a lot of times you'd stand with coaches and on Friday nights or a bye week or whatever and talk. If he was at a game and I was at a game, he stood where he stood, I stood where I stood. There wasn't no conversations, but after all those years, if I did run into him, we did exchange pleasantries.
That's great, Coach, because I always tell people I have battles with guys, and to this day I respect those guys to this day. And if people say anything to me, I'm like, I had my biggest battles with those guys. I don't have anything bad to say. I always say, if anything, you better listen to them, and they're good, or we'll just talk about it on another day, maybe 10 years down the line.
You know, I was fortunate. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't realize, if you really don't follow it, that in that period, and you talk about the rivalry, AJ brought it up last time we visited. Well, I mean, it's intense now, especially, as I said before, when that game comes down to playing, the SC UCLA game comes down to playing who goes to the Rose Bowl. And that was intense, and that was a power-packed week, to say the least. But a lot of people won't remember that at UCLA, we had that run where we won 20 straight games.
That's what I'm getting at. You had that run.
Was
people
pretty
only think
doggone.
about the Pete Carroll days. That's where I was going to get back to you. Say, UCLA had like a big run, a huge run. SC could never beat it. And then I think the Pete Carroll days came, and then it was like what, another 10 or 12 year SC run where SC just.
I don't know if at that time we had an 8-year run. I think then they had a 7-year run. Close. But people in today's world, if you say, well, I had a good experience at UCLA, if you had to say what were the two highlights that I remember the most, is being part of that 8-0 run versus USC and being part of that 20 straight victories. But and then being at SC, going to the Rose Bowl 3 straight years and beating UCLA and Troy Aikman 2 years in a row to go to the Rose Bowl. And those, you know, those are wonderful highlights for me to be part of and remember. And, you know, if you're from the Midwest, you're going to talk about Michigan State, or Iowa and Wisconsin, or Iowa and Minnesota, Michigan State. And if you're from the West Coast, you're going to talk about the rivalry. But as you spend time in the Pac-12 or Pac-10, as I was able to do, I learned that Arizona State, and that state's a big rivalry. Washington and Oregon is a big rivalry. Washington State, Washington, and Oregon State, as well as Cal and Stanford. And everybody has them. You know, because of the Los Angeles market and some great players that played in that rivalry, it stood out on a national basis.
What's your biggest UCLA USC memory then? You went to both. What will stand out? The biggest of them all. Like you said, you had Oregon State, Arizona State. You were there for all them years. What was the biggest one for you? Maybe it excited you.
Well, the first two, when Rodney Peete was our quarterback.
Oh yeah, the measles
game in '88, I believe it was, and in '87 and '88, when Troy Aikman was at UCLA, and playing that game to see who was going to go to the Rose Bowl and winning that game, that was pretty doggone exciting. And then in '94, my first year at UCLA, after I had left USC, and USC was it was 2 years, in '95, when they were going to the Rose Bowl to play Northwestern, and Cade McNown was a freshman, and we went to the Coliseum and we beat them. That was memorable. And then in the Rose Bowl, I think in '96, when they were ahead the whole game, and the game ultimately went into 3 overtimes, and we, meaning UCLA at that time, we beat them in the 3 overtime game. Wow. Those are pretty good, pretty powerful games that were great to be part of. And you know, the players, they have, you know, it's so important to them, and each school's different. AJ asked me about the difference of the schools, but when it gets down to that game and it gets down to playing on Saturdays, they're talented players with a lot of pride, and they play like big time players usually.
Mm-hmm. So you've been coaching for about 50 years. You spent 90% of them as an assistant coach. So talk more about, like, did you really enjoy being assistant for a long time? How much did you pursue being a head coach at all? Or just what shaped that overall decision to be an assistant the vast majority of your career?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I brought this up to the staff at San Diego State, and people might wonder why. Did you ever try to be a coordinator? Did you ever try to be a head coach? And you know what? I didn't. And I never really cared about it. I went to school at Cal State Northridge, and that job opened up 3 different times when I was at those schools. But I really found myself that I liked coaching big time players, and I liked coaching and preparing for big time games and having a chance to recruit big time players. And it was always important to me, and it still was even last 2 months ago for Coach Hoke. I always believed that I wasn't going to chase jobs all over the place. I was going to make the job I had, I was going to make it the Super Bowl. And I cared a lot for Coach Smith, as I said before, a lot for Coach Donahue, Coach Toledo. And I was going to make sure I gave them my best effort so we could be good and win a lot of games. And I wasn't about chasing jobs. I didn't care about that. I cared about doing a great job where I was. I cared about the players that I coached, the players I recruited, and I wasn't worried about being a head coach. I didn't care about it. I was focused on what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to, and I felt like, in those days, we were very successful at both schools, not because of me, because we had really good players and good head coaches. But I couldn't imagine myself taking a big step down just to say I'm an offensive coordinator or a head coach. In what I would have said, in what I would have thought, and people would have believed, stepping to a lower level of competition. I looked at it as I was at UCLA and I was at USC, and that was pretty damn good. And I was going to do my best to stay there forever.
No, I agree with you on that, Coach. But I think there's I loved being an assistant coach because I could coach. But I always liked being a business guy and the other things. Do you ever think maybe your position as a coach? Whenever I read articles, it's like the guys who get jobs are like the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, and the guys who don't necessarily get the big jobs are like the running back coach or maybe the offensive lineman coach.
Right.
Did you ever feel like you were like tagged on there? Because with all this experience, you could have been a phenomenal head coach. You had a tree, you had players. Was it just like you didn't care, or? Because I know I wanted to be a head coach. I'm glad I did it, but at the same time, I always tell people I miss being just an assistant coach too, where I could just coach.
Well, in those nurturing years, as I said, like the Cal State Northridge, where I went to school and where I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, opened up 3 times.
Yeah. You could have been that guy. That's what I'm saying. Were you ever?
That's what I always felt. If I might have been able to be that guy.
In Northridge.
Yeah. And I remember one time a veteran coach that was a lot older than me at that time, I asked him, I said, what do you, and that guy had been a head coach. This is interesting. And I used to carpool with that coach. And I told him one time, I said, I'm thinking about applying for the San Luis Obispo job.
Yeah.
And he looked at me sideways. He says, what did you just say? I said, I'm thinking, I said, I'm thinking about applying for the job of San Luis Obispo. San Luis Obispo? He says, you're at SC. what in the hell would you want to go to San Luis Obispo for? So he says to me, he said, let me tell you something. He said, I was in my 7th year at Toledo. I'm the head coach at the University of Toledo. And I had worked for Bo for 12 years between Miami of Ohio and Michigan. And I'm the head coach at Toledo, and we're playing Bowling Green, and that was our geographical rival. He says, I'm standing out there and I'm watching everybody warm up. He said, the whole time we were warming up, I was wishing I was the running back coach again at Michigan, and I was at Michigan getting ready for the Michigan-Ohio State game. He says, those are what you live for. Those are big games. And you know, and it really made sense to me. And so it particularly, and it was not a knock to Northridge. I mean, the paycheck that I was getting at those places was good, and is probably more than I would have made going back to Northridge. And so it was just an impact on me. And, you know, as you said, generally speaking, if you're the tackle tight end coach or the line coach or the tight end coach, you're probably not going to be up for a job. It's usually the quarterback coach or the offensive coordinator or the defensive coordinator. But, you know, I really enjoyed what I was doing. I enjoyed the players. I enjoyed recruiting. And I wanted to make sure that we were good. And picking up to leave to go be the offensive coordinator, maybe at a WAC school at the time, or it wasn't as appealing to me. And right or wrong, I mean, you know, I took pride in the profession and representing. I will say this: it is very important to me to represent the profession in a very professional manner. And I enjoyed being able to recruit my area and be able to have a good relationship with the high school coaches and to do a good job. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answers your question, AJ or Chris, but that's how I kind of felt, you know.
No, I felt like you. I remember the first year I got the Cal LA job, but I remember I walked down the stands at San Diego and someone said, "Hey, you going for the Cal LA job?" I said, "No, hell no." And then I walked down like 10 more steps of the stairs, and the guy stopped me. "Hey, you going for this Cal LA job?" And I was like, "No." And then I got down to the bottom row, and I had said yes. It was like so. I had heard like, "Wait a minute," but when I got in, I felt like I could always go back and be an assistant.
You're right.
From a head coach.
There's some.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but for me, I felt like I could always go back there, and I always felt like I owed it to myself to try to be. But there's a lot, but there's a lot to say. I know career assistants their whole life, and they stay there and they stay in that lane. There's nothing wrong with it, and they're phenomenal. Mm-hmm. They're in the Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying, I was just asking you because you know. But sometimes, like even Bradley Hoke from San Diego State, he's known as an offensive line guy, but he's a head coach at, he's at San Diego State, and he's at Michigan, and Michigan doesn't go as good, but now he's back at San Diego State, and but because he was a head coach, it seems like he's got a lot more opportunities on the table.
You know, we were having a talk about that one day, and he said he was, he was at Michigan, he was an assistant coach, and he played at Ball State, and he said he really saw himself being an assistant at Michigan a good part of the remainder of his life. And somebody called him and asked him, Lloyd Carr came in and said, "Would you want to be the head coach at Ball State? That's your alma mater." And he says, "Yeah, probably so." And he goes, "You're going to get the job here in the next 2 days." And, 2 days later, the athletic director from Ball State called him and he took the job. And, you know, maybe if I had went to school in a Mountain West school and got that same call, I probably would have done the same thing. And, but in the situation I was, there was too big a discrepancy to pursue that. And, you know, that's just the avenue I took, which, but honest to Pete, I don't ever kick myself in the pants about it. And, you know, the big thing is for me, when I left, I would like to think that people respected me for doing a good job on the field and doing a good job in recruiting and representing the universities well that I worked for, and representing the profession the proper way. That was important to me.
And you missed out on a lot of headaches. That's what you missed out being head coach. You had a lot less headaches, Coach. Trust me.
Probably. But
Coach, a lot of standouts in your career that Jonathan Ogden, Tony Bazzelli. You've also coached longtime NFL veteran Mercedes Lewis. Coached 7 NFL-bound tight ends: Mike Seidman, Brian Fletcher, Mike Grieb, Ryan Neufeld, Paul Green, Scott Galbraith, and Brad Banta. Also worked with future pro offensive linemen such as Chris Ferris, Dave Cadigan, and Pat Harlow. We were just talking just before we were scheduling this podcast how like you coached a lot of standout players. You said like I think Ogden and Bazzelli were like your measuring sticks for athletic greatness under your coaching experience. But then you said that when you're recruiting and talking to a lot of parents, a lot of them obviously dream of playing big time college football, you know, high majors, Power 5 schools. Then you were saying to me before we were doing this podcast that there's definitely a huge difference in those type of talents than just the average high school player. So talk more about just for the audience out there, like, I don't know if you want to be too harsh and be like a dream stealer or really force parents to wake up out of the dream or whatever, but talk more about the difference between those type of standout players and just the differences in those guys and just regular high school guys.
Well, let me say this first, and I'll read off a couple things or roll off a thing. Is a frustrating thing, and Chris, you probably relate to this, is when parents or people would say, there was a scout at our game Friday night from some school. And that scout said this. Number one, there are no scouts. There are no scouts. The assistant coaches recruit. The assistant coaches are the ones that go to games. Somebody says there's a scout, they're misguided. And that's part of a starting point where a lot of times parents or people in the community don't understand that. Okay, the coaches are the ones that recruit, and they're the ones that go to the schools. And the coaches are the ones that, if I go to a school or you're recruiting or you're inquiring, the first person you're going to talk to is the head coach. And people don't understand that, or sometimes the public or the parents don't understand that. But I'm going to go to that school. I'm going to talk to that coach. I'm going to talk to that counselor. I'm going to talk to whoever comes in contact with that young man. Okay. And whoever I can find. And I'm going to talk to other coaches of high schools that I trust. Or if that kid was in a camp the year before and that school, he attended the camp, I'm going to check with that other coach from that other school, because after a while you get to know most everybody. And I think that's really important. And it's important for the parents and the high school coach to be realistic about where that young man would fit in most. And, you know, remember now, if we're talking about just the Pac-12, that's 12 schools with 85 guys on scholarships. Okay. So whatever that number is, roughly 1,000 kids play Pac-12 football, right? But we're talking about an area that has 1,000 high schools in the state of California. You know, there's well over 250 schools in Arizona, not to mention Seattle and the state of Oregon.
Mhm.
There's a lot of kids that play high school football. They're not all going to be Pac-12 students. And there's a lot of places to play, and understand the other day, last Sunday, or there's Saturday, finished the draft. Okay. And I said last week, there was 50,000 kids playing college football all across the country. There was 259 kids drafted. That's
Mhm.
it. So not everybody's going to play in that arena. And so if you really want to play football, if playing football is important to you, and it should be, because you go somewhere in another area, in another walk of life, you're going to have a wonderful experience playing college football and getting a degree and making yourself more marketable as a young man for your future. And that's the real majority of the high school football players have to think about. It's not the Pac-12. It's not the image and likeness money. That is a very small margin of kids. We've got to see the big picture. And right now is kind of an important part, because this is a spring recruiting period, a spring evaluation period. And obviously it's changed in some regard because of the portal. But there are a lot of coaches going out recruiting. And after this is over with, kids and a coach and a parent might have to have a discussion of going to a summer camp or going to a couple summer camps.
Yep.
And the high school coach has got to be educated in the fact that he has got to be honest with that father and mother and kid to direct them to the right level of camp this summer. And that doesn't mean going to 8 different camps. It means to find 2 or 3, 4 camps that you make, or whatever you can afford as a family, and go to those schools where you might have a legitimate chance to make an impact.
Yep.
And have a chance. And
Stay in your lane, coach. Stay in your lane. That's what I call it. Stay in your lane.
There you go. But you got to know what lane you belong in first.
Yep.
I got the chance to work at some high school American games, and definitely like for the younger audience, like if they don't know any of the guys, these guys have coached. Like I've played one-on-one with like Onyeka Okongwu, Evan Mobley, Anthony Edwards. They're all stars in the NBA now, and these guys are really, really tall, very athletic, and like even just trying to shoot a floater over these NBA centers, like it took me 5 tries to get over their hands because that's how tall they are. And guarding like NBA guards like Anthony Edwards and then Division I guard Boogie Ellis, like it took me 5 tries just to get a stop, and because they just kept scoring baskets left and right. And you're going to learn real quick, when you face a guy like that, you have no chance to play in the major leagues.
You said you talked to all the coaches. People tell me this. They would say, "I got this recruit for you." I'm pretty sure you said the same thing as me.
No.
First thing I would say to any high school parent or coach, because I would always have come guy go, "I got a recruit for you. I got a guy for you." The first thing I ever said was, "I need your transcript and test scores." I can't, and I know you know the same thing, because if you're at UCLA or USC, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you can't get in school or you're not eligible, you're not.
You got it, yeah.
The first thing I would say to a parent, I need a transcript, a test score. If they kind of were hemming and hawing at that, I kind of knew I probably can't even deal with you.
Exactly.
If the kid was like, "I got a high school transcript and test score that works for this place," then I could sell you. I could be like,
No
"Man,
question.
all right, I can go to bat for you." But you got to take care of 1 + 1 is 2, and 2 + 2 is 4. I tell people, if you can't get 1 + 1 is 2, then you're never going to get 2 + 2 is 4. You're never going to move on.
I think sometimes there's a misnomer that, well, if you're good enough, we'll get you in school.
No.
It doesn't make, that does not the way it works. It is not the way it works. It's, as you're saying, Chris, is what does that test score, or excuse me, what does that transcript say? And one of the things it says on you is that if there's a lot of absences, a lot of tardies, then you might not be a very reliable guy. And you might choose not to recruit a guy that's not a very reliable guy. So that transcript, not only is it black and white on that transcript paper, but it also is a reflection of the type of kid you are and how responsible you are and how well you take care of business.
Yeah, and every school has admission exceptions. I say them. Every school is different, but like the lower end schools can have it. I mean, Alabama may be able to get a kid in that's just eligible. UCLA has an admission exception committee. It's hard. You know,
Real
Richard
hard.
Sherman with the Stanford, he's a really smart kid. I think Richard Sherman has a master's degree. But
Yeah.
even Richard Sherman at Stanford, I remember him saying, I'm going to go to Stanford if Stanford gets me admitted. And he had like 1,300 SAT. So think about that. Richard Sherman was phenomenal. He had to wait for Stanford to admit him.
You know, Tiger Woods is one of
Tiger Woods.
the heroes of our age. And people talk about what, you know, he's a great shot maker and all that. You know what? He's also pretty doggone smart. He got in
He went to
school at
Stanford.
Stanford. You know, and being smart means he knows how hard you got to work to develop the ability that God gave you.
Yep.
You know, I remember one of the football coaches at Stanford telling me that Tiger Woods was a sophomore or a freshman, and he's walking by in the basketball arena, and Tiger Woods was inside the basketball arena by himself, putting on the floor of the basketball court, trying to work on speed putts.
Mm-hmm.
Because how firm, obviously, the floor was. And you know, people, if you're not, if you don't have a transcript that's representative, you're not. And the other thing is it's a reflection of you and what kind of person you are.
Definitely a younger audience out there. Both of these coaches really dispute that myth that anybody can get anybody into school just because they're a good athlete. You still have to have good grades, and it really carries a lot of weight, as both of these guys have been recruiting for a long time, have said that they really take a lot of value in just seeing kids with good grades and just overall clean transcripts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you know, here's a couple things is if you're going into your senior year and you're not really being recruited, or just a minimal amount or small schools, you know, a couple things that you can do to make yourself more marketable on the field is playing on special teams.
Yep.
Playing on special teams is a way for you to demonstrate you're a playmaker. Okay. And it's a way for you to demonstrate body language because of your energy you put into special teams. Okay. And one of the examples is a guy that played for us at UCLA. He was a 3.5, 3.8 school. His dad was an NFL player, a great player. And he came to UCLA. He was a defensive back. He was a receiver. And the Patriots drafted him as a receiver DB. Okay. He's played 15 years in the NFL.
Hold on a second. We're talking about Matthew Slater.
Matthew Slater. He's got one reception,
yep.
2 carries. He's played for 15 years. He's got 3 Super Bowl rings, and he's probably made over $15 million because he's a great special teams player, a great guy in the locker room, a great character guy, and a great team guy. Okay. So there's something to that. And
yep.
You have to understand that's an avenue for a young man to display if he's a playmaker or not. You know, another thing is if you're a wrestler, that rings the bell. That's a light that goes off. That if you're a wrestler or a 3-sport athlete and you excel in 3 sports in high school, that's a red light that that goes off. That you're something special. Those are areas that you can help yourself. Are you a team captain? Would they say you're a good leader on campus?
Yep.
If there's a game is on the line, the last play, the game's on the line, and you're trying to win the game or save the game, is that player on the field or is he on the sideline watching? If you're truly a great player, somewhere you're on the field when that game's on the line.
My favorite story, you said, Coach, you just said wrestling. My favorite story is there's a guy from Bakersfield. He went to San Diego, went to Cal State Bakersfield, Stephen Neal. Stephen Neal was an Olympic wrestler, I believe, NCAA champion. And then you said it, Belichick took him for the Patriots. He went to all these practice squads. And Belichick said when I lined up Stephen Neal, he didn't even know how to put on a helmet or uniform. But he was a wrestler, Olympic. He did this, and he ended up being, and he, Belichick says, he's one of my favorite players ever. And I think Stephen Neal ended up being a 2 or 3 time All-Pro. But he had very good footwork. He was very disciplined. And they said, man, he didn't know how to put a football uniform on, but this guy was just athletic and disciplined and smart. He didn't make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people. You do most of it. So think about a guy, Stephen Neal, he did Greco-Roman wrestling. If you read the story, he wrestled Brock Lesnar from the WWE.
Really?
I think
How about
he's the
that?
only guy ever to beat Brock Lesnar.
Oh.
And he ended up winning like 2 Super Bowl rings with Belichick. My buddy Ty Lyle's on the team, but he ended up being a starting offensive lineman for Belichick and the Patriots. And
Wrestler.
when you say those stories, I would tell the people, don't think you can be a late bloomer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we're winding down this podcast, just had last couple topics I want to talk about. So one that when I was doing my prep work for this podcast, I found that you work very extensively in the community. You work very extensively on the ALS Association in Los Angeles, make multiple trips to Washington, D.C. to advocate funding and research for Lou Gehrig's disease. Met with U.S. senators and congressmen. Talk more about your active role in the community and how much community means to a college program.
Well, obviously the college program needs the community, and that was one of the things that I felt a need is I was recruiting a player at UCLA from Burbank, and he was at Valley College, but I had known him since the time he was in high school. And during the recruitment and the time that he was at UCLA, his dad was sick with ALS, and his dad ended up passing away of ALS during the time his son was playing at UCLA. And the parents and the whole family were into it, and they loved coming to the games. And the dad, when he was sick in a wheelchair, loved coming to see his son play. And I just had so much respect for him. And I remember the mom asking me if I could help them with a couple tickets for a couple representatives from ALS. And so I said, well, I'll get you the tickets, but I would like to do a lot. I would like to do more than just get a couple tickets. I want to be able to do more than that. And, as all of us, we're thankful for the good things we have in life, and our health is one of them. But I just felt compassion for that family. And I had a coach that I worked with at SC. And when we left SC and I was at UCLA, he was at Texas A&M, and he was diagnosed with ALS. And within 2 years, he was passed away. And I was really close with him. And it just hit me at the same time and really motivated me to get involved with their golf tournament that was in LA. And so the lady, the mom said, I'm gonna get you together with a couple of ladies from the office. And so I managed to be able to spend time doing things and functions to help promote, fundraising for ALS, and then advocacy issues when I went to Washington, D.C. with these people. And they were great. Obviously, they were experts in the ALS arena, and I was a novice amateur, but whatever I could do to help, I was trying to do. And when I left UCLA, then I had to leave the area, so it became more difficult. But yeah, it was important to us. And we did some things at the University of Arizona that were important. But I think that, if you're in this position that you can help people and help kids, that's your responsibility to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow. Coach, thank you. I know I got to go soon. Thank you. I really appreciate all your knowledge. Like I said, never met you before, but I've always heard of you or of new players and stuff that went with you. I guess my last question was this: for all the We've done rivals.com. We've had some people for all the underlooked people. I'll say this, Coach. I actually have an offensive lineman I coach who goes to Harvard Westlake 4.2. You're not gonna believe this. He's like Jonathan Ogden. He's like, I don't sell him, but what I'm saying, he is like 6'8". Alexander seen him. He's like 6'8", 340. And I said, but just start playing football. I say, what do you say for all the underdeveloped people like that? Because I tell his parents, you're gonna make it. There's not guys that big. As long as you keep developing, he's gonna make it. I say you just might be on this, you might be on a slower trajectory than some of the other guys.
Sure. Yeah.
But I said you can't teach. I said you can't teach 6'8", 330.
But you can't teach size. But if your heart's like that, you can't teach that either.
Yep. But this guy's good. So I'll say so I've got a lot of people asking, what would you say for the guys that they're like just behind the 8 ball, they're going to junior college, they want to make it, just let them go out.
Without a doubt.
Give them some advice to tell them how to make it.
Without a doubt, there's a place to play, and you need to resource and go to your high school coach, okay, or junior college coach and ask them, because they're contacted by numerous people. Or if that kid is aware, he can list 5 schools that would interest him. Go to his counselor, find schools, and have the football coach call those 5 schools.
Yep.
In the WAC, in the Pac-12, in the Mountain West, in all the different conferences, Big Sky, they all have a person that is responsible to recruit your school. And if the guy's doing a reputable job recruiting, the high school coach knows of them, and all he has to do is call somebody in the recruiting office and say, who recruits so-and-so high school for your school? And he'll say, Gary Bernardi. Okay, can I get in touch with Coach Bernardi? And then talk to him.
Yeah.
But there's a place to play if you really want to. And when you talk about different locations and things you haven't seen before, you don't know, because most of these guys have never seen a college team practice, let alone play. And there's a lot of beautiful places and campuses all over the country. And here's the other thing. The last thing is, if you play college football and you get your degree, you have shown an employer that you have the intestinal fortitude to do things that people are looking for when they want to hire people.
Mm-hmm.
You've gotten up at 6 a.m. and gone to off-season class. You've had to make critical decisions at critical times. You've learned to take criticism.
Mm-hmm.
You've learned to compete. And in today's world, young adults don't really want to be criticized.
Mm-hmm. I love that you say that. This is what I tell all my athletes. I say I said the normal student might go to class and have a job. You've had practice. You've had me dealing with you. You're an advisor. I'm a tough coach. I'm going hard at you. I want to make you the best. So like these student athletes who graduate from college are much more prepared for the real world than I say just a regular student that hasn't done it. Not a knock against them, but I tell you, I never had a spring break. I was a walk-on. We had practice all the time.
Yeah.
It just was, I had 3 jobs in college, and I had class and practice. I got one job, it was easy. People go, oh, how are you doing so great? I mean, I only got 1 job. I had 4 in college.
Yeah, do what you got to do.
Yeah.
You find a way to make yourself marketable and valuable. What is your value? And a lot of kids don't realize that you have to display and show what your value is. And if you are part of a program, you are not going to play in a game if the coach does not trust you.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not provide, you can be a great player and this and that, but a coach's butt is on the line, and he is not going to put you in the game. Even though you might be the better player, if he doesn't trust that you're going to go in there and do that job properly, not going to put you in the game. Kids
that's
have
smart kids are. That's
hard...
why I would say intelligent kids are really good. Because if I got a good intelligent kid, even if he's not as good as athletic, I go, this kid's not going to make a mistake. This kid's really smart. You know, he's disciplined. He listens. like you said, you might have a really good kid and he just might not pay attention to anything. And you're like, I'm not putting this dude in the game. He's gonna get a penalty for me. And my coach can fire me.
Yeah, exactly.
Coach Bernardi, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed hearing all your amazing stories and experiences. You have had a long, lengthy, storied career with a lot of wonderful experiences doing all different types of schools and helping a lot of kids. You mentioned your coaching routine was 18 hours per day. So over the course of your entire career, you spent several 100,000 hours just working your butt off, molding young minds and helping them grow into adults, really good functioning members of society. It was great hearing about you and meeting you and talking to you on this podcast. So Coach Bernardi, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. All the best to you.
Thank you.